Welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 432 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not only asked to agree with me, I'm asking you to hear me out. This first part of the episode is going to be a little rough. It's going to be tough because I'm going to have to give the Boston Celtics their credit. And I am, like most of the sports world, not a big fan of the Boston Celtics, but I'm going to give them their credit. So bear with me. But here we go. It's always interesting, the feeling that you have after an accomplishment. Or it's always interesting, the feeling that you have after watching someone accomplish something. Obviously, there's a myriad of feelings. There's a myriad of emotions that come with victory, that also come with loss. But I am fascinated by how I feel after watching the Boston Celtics win the championship, how people are covering the Boston Celtics winning the NBA championship. It's fascinating because I feel like there's a sense of uniformity in feeling. And what is that feeling? There's not a feeling of shock. There's not a feeling of surprise. There's a feeling of expectation. And what I mean by that is, all year, I've been saying it, most media pundits have been saying it, but all year, we've been talking about how good the Celtics have been. We've been praising the Celtics for their offseason moves. We've been praising Brad Stevens for some of the acquisitions that he had or that he was able to obtain, whether that's getting off of Marcus Smart, whether that's getting Porzingis, whether that's getting Drew Holiday. Praise has been raining down on the Boston Celtics, and rightfully so, for the moves that they made. And those moves have been considered championship moves. And while obviously I'm not the biggest Boston fan, there is a level of happiness that I have, obviously, to see someone like Jason Tatum win a championship, to see someone like Jaylen Brown win a championship. But this is probably, I haven't really felt this feeling since, the 2016, 17, 2018, 19 Warriors. And that is the conclusion that I expected happened. And it's just like, well, it is what it is. And that's going to sound like hate. That's going to sound like me minimizing the moment, and it's not. Let me start by saying congratulations to the Boston Celtics for winning the NBA championship, the franchise's 18th, which is now the most in NBA history. And it's been an incredible run this year. And I think that is where a lot of my feeling comes from. As condescending as it sounds, what did you expect? The Boston Celtics won 64 games or 60-something games this regular season. The Boston Celtics were allotted as the best team leaps and bounds. And rightfully so. They were. If you look on paper, the Boston Celtics had the best team in basketball. And I think I would have been more shocked if the Boston Celtics wouldn't have made the NBA Finals, or the Boston Celtics would have lost the NBA Finals, than I was for them winning. And they deserve to win. Basketball, any sport, there's a level of attrition that you have to have going into, a series, usually the healthiest team wins. And that is something that is going to follow this Boston Celtics team until they either, I don't know, win back-to-back or they win again or something happens. They're going to say, and rightfully so, because I've been saying this as well, look at the journey that it took to get here. Look at the teams that they had to play in the playoffs and the health of those teams. And you're absolutely right. They did not play outside of the NBA Finals. They did not play a fully healthy team until they got to the finals. And obviously there's going to be people that talk about Luka Doncic and his injury or injuries and him laboring through. But in all intents and purposes, the Boston Celtics did not play a healthy team until they got to the finals. And that is obviously a criticism that could be had. And I was on that boat saying, yeah, well, they haven't really played anybody. And honestly, when I look at how the Pacers series in the Eastern Conference Finals, how that went down, there's a good argument that they should have lost that series if obviously Indiana knew how to finish games. And you have every right to hook your opinions on that coat rack of they didn't play a healthy team, they're not good, or this is a fluke. Okay. And if that is the angle that you're going to take, I respect it. You do your thing, brother or sister. But I'm looking at this Boston team. And I'm looking at the teams that weren't healthy. Obviously, the Miami Heat without Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson. And I look at the Indiana Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton. I look at the Cleveland Cavaliers without Jared Allen, without Donovan Mitchell. And while not having those players was definitely a boost for the Boston Celtics, I was thinking to myself, if the Boston Celtics played them and they were fully healthy, I just like I'm sure America would take the Boston Celtics. What we saw this year from the Boston Celtics is what a complete team looks like. And not just that, this is one of the rare occasions where we saw a team, a lineup. Let's just look at the starting lineup. We saw the starting lineup complement each other perfectly. I don't think those Golden State Warriors, the dynasty teams, I don't think they complemented themselves perfectly. They just had more talent than the others. Like, I don't think Kevin Durant complements Steph Curry as much as people think. They're just two historic players, and they were just better than the rest, along with Klay Thompson. Now, I do think Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry complement each other, but that's 3 of the 5. I don't think those rosters complemented each other. They were just historically better. I don't think the Miami Heat, the Heatles, LeBron, D. Wade, Chris Bosh, I don't think they complemented each other as much as, this Boston Celtics team. Obviously, they had LeBron James, who was the best player in the world. They had D. Wade, who was great. Chris Bosh kind of glued everything together. But the whole roster didn't complement each other. When you look at this Boston Celtics team, shouts out to Jalen Rose. He tweeted this. He tweeted an old clip that he said a couple years ago, talking about this Boston Celtics team and what Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum need, because there was a lot of people, including myself. So I'm not gonna say I'm better than anyone, I'm smarter than anyone. I was one of those people as well that thought that the ceiling for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum had been reached. And this was a couple years ago. I didn't think that we would see a championship out of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, because they never really had a complementary roster outside of these last few years. They haven't, well, actually, outside of these last, 2 years, they haven't really had outside of this last year, now I think about it, they haven't really had a complimentary roster. They had a good roster. They didn't have a roster to complement them. But when you look now, and that's why I give all the praise in the world to Brad Stevens. When you look now and you look at this roster and you look at how the acquisition of Drew Holiday unlocks and allows Jaylen Brown to be Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to be Jason Tatum. And then you have Derek White, who's one of the most unselfish players, and all he really does is defend and shoot threes and just does the dirty work. And then on top of that, you lose Robert Williams, you struggle with height, and you have Al Horford, who's obviously up there in age. And you find a way to get Kristaps Porzingis, who found his defensive prowess in Washington. I can't say how much. I can't stress how much this Boston Celtics team is the motto of complete. Which goes back to the first point, as in we should have expected this. Now, that doesn't take away from the congratulations. That doesn't take away from the feeling of elation that the Boston Celtics fans and the Boston Celtics themselves should have. But we should have expected this. Boston earned this. This wasn't, I talk about this a lot, man. This wasn't just a year. They didn't just compile a team. This was years of losing, losing in the finals, losing in the Eastern Conference Finals, losing before they probably felt they should. Smart, figuring out, okay, how did we lose this time? Where are our holes at? Where are our weaknesses? It might not take. Now, yes, I am one of those people that think that they probably should have won in 2022, but they didn't. I think they were the better team. They just ran into an all-time great player and another player in Andrew Wiggins that was playing best basketball of his career. But there's so many congratulations that needs to be spread. Whether we talk about, again, Brad Stevens, Joe Mazzulla. I think one of the youngest coaches ever to win a championship. And people were killing Joe Mazzulla, especially after last year when they lost to the Miami Heat. They were killing him. I don't know if he's a great coach. Hey, he's a champion now. Let's talk about this NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics were clearly the better team. Everyone should have known that. Everyone should have saw that. Majority of people pick the Dallas Mavericks to beat Boston, not because when you look, they're just a better team, not because they honestly felt that that Dallas did things better than Boston. Most people picked Dallas because of either A, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and how they were on a historic run, or B, they just didn't like Boston. Because when you look at this finals, bro, Boston dominated damn near every game. Except for game 4 when they just got ran out the park. But, it's very hard to close a team, especially on the road, that has historic players. Luka is a historic player. Kyrie is a historic player. But when you look down the roster, one thing that I'm going to give Jason Tatum credit for, and I think that this is what essentially cost him the NBA Finals MVP. What I'm going to give him credit for is him understanding the moment and understanding kind of like, I'm not going to go back to it, but kind of like, it's very hard for stars, it's very hard for good players to understand the situation. A lot of times they just think their skill is what's going to get them over the top, or they think because I'm here and because I was great last series or because I was important last series that this is where it's going to be, that like this is what they need from me. That's not true. One thing that is grossly under talked about is how every single Boston Celtic player knew their role and played their role to perfection, not just this entire playoff run, but the entire year. I questioned if Jaylen Brown can be a number one option. I put it in I had a reel about it. I put it in a clip. I wasn't sure if Jaylen Brown can be a number one option for a team. And as I sit here today, I still don't know if Jaylen Brown can be a number one option for a team and that team be, playoff bound or championship. I don't think so. But what Jaylen Brown has showed me is he, alongside of this entire Boston team, knows how to play their role. Which goes back to Jason Tatum. What we saw in Game 5, I think Jason Tatum had like 30 and 12, 30 and 13. That Jason Tatum, we could have seen this entire playoffs. The entire narrative around Jason Tatum has been he's been coasting this entire playoffs. And I don't think a lot of people really discussed how crazy that is. And not crazy in a bad way, crazy in a, that should show you how good this Boston Celtics team is. That their best player, their unequivocal best player, is able to coast and turn it on when he needs to in the playoffs. Again, maybe he wouldn't be able to coast if he played fully healthy teams, but I still don't think if any of the teams that he played, Cleveland, Indiana, or Miami, I don't think if any of them was healthy, they would have beat this Boston team. But Jason Tatum played his role to perfection. Everyone on this Boston Celtics team played their role to perfection. I think that's why we were at Game 3 and Game 4, and we still could not decide who was a Finals MVP. Shouts out to Jaylen Brown for winning not only the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, but the NBA Finals MVP. Definitely deserved. But I wouldn't have been mad if they gave it to Jason Tatum, because Jason Tatum, I think he was the 7th player, if the graphic is correct. He was the 7th player to lead his team in points, rebounds, and assists the entire playoffs or in the finals. But what Jason Tatum understood was, okay, I'm going to bring it up because I didn't want to. I feel like I've been bashing him the last few episodes, but it is what it is. That's what Karl Anthony Towns couldn't figure out. This series might not be my series. However, this series favors a Jaylen Brown. This series favors a Drew Holiday. This series favors a Al Horford. So let's get them involved. Jason Tatum played masterful in these playoffs. Even though you can say he coasted, and I do believe he coasted, he turned it on when he needed to. Mind you, this is the same Jason Tatum that had a 50-plus point game last year in Game 7. So it ain't like he can't score. And it's not like he doesn't show up in big moments. Now, yes, people are going to look at what happened in the NBA Finals or what's going to happen or what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals and be like, well, but Jason Tatum, I don't think that there's 5 players that right now in the NBA that you can say is better than Jason Tatum. I'm not saying he's number 1, but what I'm saying is Jason Tatum is an elite player. And his willingness to defer to others makes him just that much more of an elite player. Then we get to Jaylen Brown. I talked about this when I said who, because an argument that was throughout this entire playoffs was who is better? Whose team is it? Is it Jason Tatum's team or is it Jaylen Brown? Who's more important? And what I was saying is, while Jaylen Brown is incredible, while Jason Tatum is incredible, there really should be no question who is the better player. The better player is Jason Tatum. And we know that Jason Tatum is the better player by how teams defend the Boston Celtics. And how Jason Tatum, not 10 times out of 10, is probably number one in the scouting report. And how Jason Tatum gets all the attention. But I need to give credit to Jaylen Brown. Because, like I said last episode, Jaylen Brown has been masterful. And Jaylen Brown has been incredible in doing his job. And what his job is, beating the one-on-one. Because your teammate, your running mate, is going to get most of the double team. So they're not going to double team. They could, but it probably wouldn't be smart with this team. You're going to double Jason Tatum. You're going to have to beat the one-on-one matchup. And he did that. While, yes, I don't think this was a robbery. Because I see a lot of people talking about that. I don't think that this was a robbery. I think if Jason Tatum would have won the Finals MVP, well-deserved. But I think that it was also well-deserved that Jaylen Brown, seeing as though how important he was to doing his job. Just like I also believe he deserved to win the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. What's scary about this Boston Celtics team is everybody is under contract, I think, for next year or the next 2 years. Meaning the team that blew through the NBA in the regular season, the team that blew through the playoffs, is probably going to be here intact next year. Obviously, we'll have to see about Al Horford. And shouts out to Al Horford. He was, I think, the second longest tenured player to ever, or to have as many games played and not won a championship. I think he went 17 years. So shouts out to him. Definitely well-deserved, definitely well-deserved. But most of this team is under contract for the next year, next 2 years. So I'm not going to throw out that word that I'm hearing a lot of people say. And you know exactly what that word is. They're not there yet. But what I will say is, if there's any team that has a good shot of repeating, just like the same feeling I had with the UConn Huskies that ended up going back to back, I can see it with this Boston Celtics team. Seeing as though all of your players are pretty much locked up. And it's looking like Jason Tatum is about to get that 5-year extension. So, congratulations to the Boston Celtics for, winning the NBA championship. Definitely well-deserved. Another conversation I heard was, where does this team rank as far as dominant teams ever? This team only lost 3 games. And most of those 3 games, it just shows you just the talent level of the NBA. And it shows you, while there are gaps, meaning there's a gap between how good the Boston Celtics are compared to how good, let's say, the Portland Trail Blazers are, there's a huge gap. Especially when you get to playoff teams, that gap isn't as large as you would think, even though I do think that Boston was the best team overall, and they obviously showed that winning the championship. I don't think that there was a huge gap between the best team and the second or third best team, which is kind of what you saw. Boston lost 3 games this entire playoffs, and each one of those games, you either saw a historic shooting game from the other team, or you saw what happens when the Boston Celtics or any team lose focus for a game. I think that's what we saw in Game 4 of the finals, where the Mavericks beat them by like 30 points. I just think the Celtics lost focus. They kind of walked in thinking, all right, we're about to sweep these people. And you see, the Mavericks came in as a desperate team. But I have to rank this team very high. Not only did they only lose 3 games in their entire run to the championship, but they destroyed teams. Like, game 1 of the finals, they won 107-89. I think it was game 3. They were up 30 points at one time. Now, I think the greatest run of all time is either... Well, no. I think the greatest run of all time it rivals between the 2016-17 Golden State Warriors. They obviously lost 1 game their entire playoff run, and that was Game 4 of the NBA Finals, just like the Boston Celtics. They lost to LeBron James and the Cavaliers. Or the 0-1 Lakers, Shaq and Kobe, they only lost 1 game. They lost to Allen Iverson and the Philadelphia 76ers game 1 of the playoffs. Or no, game 1 of the finals. I would rank this very high. Not just because they only lost 3 games, not just because they were destroying people, not just because they won the championship, but the fact of you're not going to see many teams complete each other, complement each other like this Boston Celtics team, which goes back to shouts out to the front office. That's the biggest MVP, understanding and knowing what the market is, knowing what the trade market is, knowing what the availability is, and attacking it to perfection. So I would rank this high. I'd probably rank it in the top 5. You know, I wasn't old enough to see those, 80s Lakers or Celtics or 70s Lakers or 70s Celtics. I wasn't, But from the champions that I saw from 1994, obviously you have the 72-10 Bulls, but I'm just talking about their playoff runs. And I think that I'm not saying that they would do. Whoa. I'm not saying that this Boston Celtics team would beat that 72-10 Bulls. I'm just saying the playoff runs. What we saw out of these teams, I would rank the Boston Celtics at least top 5 as far as most dominant playoff runs that we've seen. Again, I know that people are going to minimize and discredit what the Boston Celtics did because they didn't play a healthy team until they got to the finals. But I ask you honestly, take your fandom out of it, because I have to take out of mine. But take your fandom out of it, take your biasness out of it, which is hard to do. But do you think that this Celtics team would have lost to the Heat? A Heat team that barely scraped to make it into the play-in or playoffs, let alone play-in. You think they would have lost to a Cleveland Cavaliers team that didn't have the greatest season either? They finished the season after All-Star break. They were really good, but you think they would have lost to a Pacers team that has historically been known this year to not play a lick of defense? I do think they should have lost to the Pacers, but they didn't. So that what I think doesn't matter. This was one of the most historic dominant runs we have ever seen. And it's only fitting that it was capped off with an NBA championship. So shouts out again to the Boston Celtics. Shouts out to them. Shouts out to Jason Tatum being one of the best players in the NBA. I don't know why he doesn't really get the respect as one of the best players, but he for sure is. Shouts out to Jaylen Brown for being Finals MVP. Shouts out to every single person. Shouts out to Jrue Holiday being the key, the missing piece to this championship team, which he was the missing piece, the key to the Bucks championship when 2001. Jrue Holiday, I understand that he doesn't have the most flashiest numbers. I understand that, he's not the most popular player. And he's not as good as Steph. He's not as good as, the greats. But Jrue Holiday is one of the most important players in the NBA. Jrue Holiday's presence on a team cannot be understated. He is the main reason why the Boston Celtics won this championship. What he was able to do on the defensive side of the ball, his ability to bring that championship pedigree to this team, his ability to connect with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, his viewpoints on the game, his impact, his scoring. And he's not even known as a scorer. Just his presence is the biggest reason why Boston won this championship. To the point where I think he finished third in finals MVP voting. Rightfully so. And he's the main reason why they won. Not the biggest, but the main, as far as just his acquisition and him being on the team. And when I said that, I think Jalen Rose, again, that the clip said it, they just need a point guard that can even everything out and calm everything down. Well, they had it in Jason Tatum or Jrue Holiday. I'm sorry. Shouts out to the Boston Celtics for winning the 2024 NBA championship. 32 minutes in, and we're going to get to the other team, the Dallas Mavericks. I think the title of this episode is going to be, I think the title of this episode is going to be Foregone Conclusions. If I haven't titled that, if that hasn't been the title for any other episode, it's going to be the title for this one. Because I believe, and I've said it all year, multiple people have said it all year, I think it was a foregone conclusion that the Boston Celtics would at least make it to the championship. Now, obviously, you don't want to go as far as say win it, but I'm not shocked that they won. I think the most shocking thing about this NBA Finals was that Dallas made it. And I will say shouts out to Dallas as well. This shows you the importance of team, the importance of team building. Because I am 100% sure this Dallas Mavericks team would not have made it if they didn't make the acquisitions to get Daniel Gafford, to get PJ Washington. So the congratulations, obviously, should go to Dallas for making it to the championship. But Dallas should also be a cautionary tale. And Dallas proves almost everything that I say about series. What I say is a series exposes you for who you are. And some of your weaknesses can be killer. Some of them can be overcome by your strengths. And while, yes, the Mavericks did have a gauntlet of a run. They had to go against the Clippers. They had, like, just listen to this, man. In terms of players, look at who they had to go through. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Paul George, I think for 1 game or 2 games, Kawhi Leonard. Who else did they play? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels. Those are the players that they had to go through just to get to the NBA Finals. So the road in and of itself alone was incredible. And the fact that they were able to make it is incredible in and of itself. Like, I give them all the credit for making it. But this finals really exposed just the glaring weaknesses, not just in the Dallas Mavericks, but in their stars. And that is Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. There's no question. It has been clear as day since day one of him coming into the league that Luka is not the most present on defense. And as historic of a player is that he is, I think he's a top 5 player in the league probably right now. One thing that cannot be understated is how poor or how much he does not care about defense. Or how, I'm not going to say he doesn't care because that sounds crazy. How he does not put in effort. That is true. Doesn't put in effort on defense. And against maybe the Clippers, that's fine. Even though I thought the Clippers were going to win, the Clippers didn't help themselves. So maybe against the Clippers is fine. Or maybe against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who had the weirdest game plan of all time, going against the Dallas Mavericks. That's cool. You don't have to play defense like that, especially when you're scoring 40, 45 points in a game. Get it? But what happens when you're playing against a team that has the perfect game plan against you guys? And that's like, yo, we know Luka's going to get his offensively, but let's make him work. And on top of that, you have the players to make your best players work. That whole not playing defense thing ain't going to work. And it didn't. Yo, they feasted on Luka Doncic's matchups. That is the Boston Celtics. And they should have. They feasted on the Kyrie Irving matchups. Kyrie Irving played better defense and tried a little bit more on defense, but he's still undersized. And he's never really been, he's been an okay. He's been a little more than, a little above average defensively, but he's never been, he ain't Drew Holiday. So Dallas, they just ran into a better team. And I will say this. I think that they were the lesser team every single step of the game. I think they were. I think they weren't the better team against the Clippers. I think that the Clippers just they can't get their act together. I don't think they were a better team on paper than the number 1 seed in Oklahoma City. But the youth finally hit Oklahoma City against a team that is more experienced, or at least has more experienced player, and that is in Kyrie and the Dallas Mavericks. Again, Luka even made it to a Western Conference Finals, so they just ran into experience. And I don't think they were a better team than the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's just the Minnesota Timberwolves had the dumbest game plan of all time. But they finally ran into a team that is better than them and had a perfect game plan for them. And you saw what happened. You see, the only hope that you have when you're the underdogs, but you have historic players, is that those historic players play historically. The only shot that Dallas had is they played this, or their role players are hitting shots like they were against Minnesota. That is PJ Washington. That is a Tim Hardaway. They hit shots, and your best players, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, goes historic. Well, neither of which happened. Kyrie Irving, and I will say shout out to Kyrie Irving. He had one of the best seasons he's had as a player. Even though it didn't end in a championship, we saw a level of growth, a level of maturity that we have not seen from Kyrie pretty much his entire, probably since actually, we haven't really seen this version of Kyrie, the leader, the one that embraces being a leader. And it seems like he's at peace with himself. So shouts out to Kyrie for that. Had an incredible season. But Kyrie struggled like crazy in the finals. Obviously, when you have Drew Holiday, when you have Jaylen Brown, both bigger guards, it's going to tire you out. Even Derek White, a bigger guard. Luka Doncic, they threw everything at the kitchen sink at Luka Doncic, and it worked. Getting fouled out, arguing with the refs, not playing defense. Like, come on. I will say shout out for Dallas for making it, but this outcome, I had Boston in 6 because I just thought that Dallas was going to win 2. I was wrong. I thought Dallas had 1 at home, which they did, and maybe they could have found something in Boston. I thought they were going to win game 1 because Kristaps Porzingis, but I was wrong. So I will say congratulations to Dallas for making it, which I didn't expect. The last thing I'm going to say before we move on, and I feel like I have to say this all the time because I'm already hearing it. We'll be back next year. Dallas fans, Dallas players will be back next year. I think if there's any team that you can bet on not being it back more than ever, it's this Dallas team. Now, I was wrong about them making it. I was wrong about almost every single stop in this playoff journey for the Mavericks, but I don't think I'm wrong. Now, if I am wrong, I obviously will come in here and say I was wrong. I don't mind admitting my faults. But if there's any team that I can be almost sure that they will not be back unless they make drastic changes, it's this Dallas team. Not just because of them, but because of the road that they would have to go. Look at all the teams that they did not have to face. Like, they didn't have to see the Denver Nuggets. They didn't have to see the Phoenix Suns. Even though they didn't make it, they didn't have to see the Golden State Warriors. They didn't have to see the Lakers. Now, obviously, you can say, well, they should have won. Very true. But just look at the gauntlet that is the Western Conference. And we're not even anticipating. I haven't even said anybody moving. Like, you're going to have to go against next year in the West. You have the Clippers. You have the Suns. You have the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets. You have the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like, it's going to be a tough road to get back. I think Boston, I'm not going to say book it, but I think Boston has the best shot of making it back because, while yes, there are teams going to be healthy to me and see with free agency, because I think if Paul George goes to Philly, that changes a lot. But you really only have 2, maybe 3 teams to worry about. And one of the teams in the Milwaukee Bucks, they got some things to figure out too. So all I'm saying is, for all those, we'll be back. I don't know. I'm gonna bank on not being back more than being back. I'll just say that. But I'm not taking away from this year. I'm not taking away from the run that they had. Shouts out to the Dallas Mavericks for making it to the finals. And shouts out to the Boston Celtics for winning the finals. So let's move forward. And I don't know what to say at this point. I don't know. The adjectives are not there. I don't know what to say at this point to get people to understand and realize that we are watching one of not just the faces of boxing, but we're watching one of the greatest boxers to ever live. I'm not saying he is. I know a lot of people, a lot of the boxing community, a lot of the typing warriors are about to go crazy. I'm not saying that he's the greatest of all time. But there's at no point has Gervonta Davis showed you that he's not at least a historic fighter. Yo. So Gervonta Davis beats Frank Martin by knockout. And when I tell you, he knocked that man out. I think the memes, the videos, they've circulated, man. But he knocked Frank Martin out so viciously, man. Gervonta Davis is one of the faces of boxing. I'm only going to say one of, because, you know, we have weight classes and it's very hard to just pinpoint one face of boxing, seeing as though, you know, Gervonta will never face Usyk, or he'll never face, I don't know, Tyson Fury, or you know. But he is one of the faces of boxing. And he is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best pound for pound boxer in the world. Like at some point, he's 30-0. He's 30-0 with 28 knockouts, including Frank Martin. And don't get me wrong, I know people who say Frank should have never been in the. Okay, I got it. But in fact, his last. Hold up. His last 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 fights have been either KO or TKO. Now, I understand that there are people in the boxing world that he has not fought that I think would be incredible fights, like Lomachenko, like Shakur Stevens. I think those would be great fights. I don't know if they're the same weight class, but, you know, Bud Crawford. And for that, I'm like, yeah, I understand. Those would be really cool fights, and I would love to see them. But outside of Bud, I don't think Shakur Stevens would beat Gervonta Davis. I don't think Lomachenko would beat Gervonta Davis. At some point, we have to put respect on what we're seeing. And 30 people have tried to beat this man. And 30 people, 28 of them have been knocked out, but all 30 have lost. Now, I know a lot of people, Frank Martin sucks. Like, hold up. Frank Martin was, what, 29-1? Or 29-0 at the time? Now he's, or 21-0 or something like that. He wasn't no scrub. He just wasn't Gervonta Davis. But he knocked that man out so bad. I know it's probably controversial, and boxing is weird, and we all know boxing is weird at how they do fights and when they fight people and who they fight, and it's the politics of boxing is nasty in my opinion. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think historically Gervonta Davis is one of the greatest boxers we've ever seen. And this isn't just me pulling something out of a hat. Like, his record proves it. It's not like he's fighting scrubs and no. He's fighting people in most of their prime. Now I would love to see Canelo Alvarez, but that kind of seems more of he's ducking Gervonta more than Gervonta's ducking him. In fact, I don't obviously I don't know, but I don't think Gervonta Davis would be ducking anybody. You hear Devin Haney's pops talking about he wants to see Gervonta. Bruh. No, you don't. Ryan Garcia's talking about he wants a rematch. No, you don't. I understand you have to build up a fight and understand that you know the anticipation, but Gervonta Davis is the best boxer in the world, in my opinion. One of the best. And Frank Martin was just the next person to solidify that. So, shouts out to Gervonta Davis for knocking out, and I mean brutally knocking out Frank Martin. I think it was in the 8th round. And shouts out to Gervonta for being one of the greatest boxers, in my opinion, we've ever seen. So, let's move forward. And when Justin Jefferson got his deal, I talked about market. And I stressed how Justin Jefferson's deal should not set the market because he is the best player in football, or the best wide receiver in football, I would say. And no one should get anything close to him, or he shouldn't be the marketer. No one should make more than him because they're not better than him. That's what I was talking about with Justin Jefferson's contract. And I heard a lot of people came to me talking about how wrong I am and this, that, and the third, and that, you know, just contract doesn't make markets. And that for that, they are true. The market is not just set, and the market isn't just based on what someone's willing to pay you. Obviously, the market change, you know, things dictate the market, and people's market are different. Trevor Lawrence gets a 5-year, $275 million extension. I think 210 of that is guaranteed, I believe. Let me first talk about the deal. I understand the crowd, and I hear the crowd that's saying, what has Trevor Lawrence done to warrant this contract, warrant being paid one of the greatest, or one of the highest paid and one of the best quarterbacks in the league? What has he done to get that? He doesn't have the playoff resume like you think he does. He doesn't have the regular season resume. Why do they get that? Or what did Trevor Lawrence do to deserve that contract? I understand the sentiment. And for that, I will say, I understand where they're coming from. And to a certain extent, I think Trevor Lawrence got paid. Let's look at it as a diagram. Let's look at it as a chart, like a pie chart. I think 35% of this contract was paid to him based on what he's done. And I'll say 35 based on what he's done. Based on the minimal playoff success, the comeback with the Chargers, based on some of the regular season numbers that he puts up, I think 35% of this contract was based on what he has done. I also think, and even though they be killing Emmanuel Acho, rightfully so, some of his takes be job crazy, I do think that a lot of this contract, or a lot of the 35%, also came from what he did in Clemson. But I think 65% is based on potential. And I think that could be a gift and a curse. If we're just talking about what Trevor Lawrence has done, then no, there's no way, shape, or form you think that he deserves a $275 million contract. He's one of the, year after year, he's amongst the league leaders in interceptions. I think that he hasn't been past the second round of the playoffs. I get it. Nothing about what he's done warrants a $275 million contract extension. But what I think the Jaguars did is they paid him off of potential. And they also paid him because of market. And what I mean by that is this. I think that we've been talking about some of the best quarterbacks, and when we do quarterback rankings, we always talk about who's the best, where do they rank and everything, and rightfully so. And Trevor Lawrence's name is always a tricky one because people like to rake him on his potential more than the product that he's put on tape. Now, the product that he put on tape is good, but it's not top tier. That's kind of the same argument that we have about Justin Herbert. I think some of the things that he puts on tape, some of the things Trevor Lawrence has put on tape is eye-popping and show-stopping. But when we talk about the total package, we haven't seen it yet. But I think Trevor Lawrence got paid 65% about what his potential is. I think potentially he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But we just need to see it more. And I think that's the danger that you run into. Because what if you look up 5 years from now and Trevor Lawrence's resume pretty much stays towards the same. The Jaguars are borderline playoff, borderline second round team. He has a bunch of touchdowns in the regular season. He also has a bunch of interceptions. I think that if that looks the same in about 3 to 4 years, you're going to really regret giving Trevor Lawrence this contract. Because you don't give him this contract just because, you think he deserves it for what he's done. You're giving the contract for what you hope that he does. I'm not saying that Trevor Lawrence is going to win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that he's even going to take a team to a Super Bowl. But Trevor Lawrence has to look like one of the best quarterbacks in the league when you have a deal like this. And some nights he does, some more days he does, but majority of the time he doesn't. He just looks like a above average or above middle of the pack quarterback. So I think 35% of this contract is what he's done, and 65% is what they hope he will blossom into. And that is the fear that they kind of run. I also said that a lot of the 35 was about market. And that kind of gets to my second part of this topic. What you have to understand and why you're seeing a lot of these players, a lot of these quarterbacks get these ginormous deals is because of the market. And when you look, I was talking about this a little bit with CeeDee Lamb, but this is going to be centered around Dak Prescott. Trevor Lawrence is not the best quarterback in the league. Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion, is not close to the best quarterback in the league. There's multiple quarterbacks that I would pick before I say Trevor Lawrence's name. Which kind of goes back to why I think that he was paid mostly on potential. He was also paid because, okay, if I'm not going to pay Trevor Lawrence and I'll let Trevor Lawrence walk, who are you getting to replace Trevor Lawrence that can do what Trevor Lawrence does? That's another thing that sets the market. My importance to your team. Everyone's importance is different, right? Not everyone has. Now, not every quarterback is important, but some quarterbacks mean just a tad bit more to their team than others. I think Trevor Lawrence's importance to the Jaguars is immense. And I also acknowledge the fact, and he and the Jaguars know this, which is why they paid him what they paid him. If not me, then who? If not me, then who? If foregone conclusions has already been taken as a title, if not me, then who is going to be the next option? You can feel how you feel about the contract. You can think he deserves it. You can think he doesn't. That's your prerogative. But Trevor Lawrence, just like the Jaguars, just like his agents, understand that it's going to cost you more to lose said player than it is to pay him. And what I mean by that is the Jaguars are one of those teams that thinks that they're on the cusp of being a Super Bowl caliber team. Well, that whole thinking goes out the window if you don't have a top-tier quarterback. A top-tier. I talked about this when we talked about the 49ers. Gone are the days where you can have a mediocre quarterback and a historic defense around and still think that you're good enough to win a Super Bowl. You need an above average to elite quarterback. That's what Trevor Lawrence is in their eyes. You lose him, there's not just a pool of available elite quarterbacks. In fact, let's back up. There is not an elite quarterback that is available, because if they were elite, they wouldn't be available. So when they say that he would cost more, it would cost the team more to lose him than it would be to let him go. That's what that means. Your future is cooked if you don't have someone to replace Trevor Lawrence. And there's nobody on the market that you would get that's even close to Trevor Lawrence, because if there was, they would not be on the market. Let's keep it a stack. Which brings me to my next point. I'm not going to go as far as to say poverty franchise, because that would be disrespectful to them. And that blatantly wouldn't be true. But we have to be honest, and we can't keep calling the Dallas Cowboys a top-tier franchise when they keep making low-frequency decisions. When Justin Jefferson got his deal, I talked about how Justin Jefferson's deal is going to affect CeeDee Lamb's deal and how that's going to affect Micah Parsons' deal because of their importance to the Dallas Cowboys. Remember, I also added in Dak Prescott, but I also excluded Dak Prescott because I said, oh, they're going to get a deal done, because that's what they should do. It goes back to the Trevor Lawrence. You lose more. It's more costly to have Trevor Lawrence leave than it is to pay him $275 million. Dallas continues to have a bad offseason because the last thing you want to do. Remember, I talked about market. Boom. Let's get back to that. I talked about market, and I talked about how there really isn't anybody close to Justin Jefferson's market outside of players that have already been paid. Outside of the Tyreek Hills, outside of the Devontae Adams, outside of the, Jamar Chase to an extent. Those A.J. Brown, they've already been taken care of. So nobody else that is at least looking for a contract should think that their market is close to Justin Jefferson's. Trevor Lawrence is different. You can look at what Trevor Lawrence has done and say, oh, there's a good number of people that can put their market near Trevor Lawrence's contract because they've done something comparable to Trevor Lawrence, i.e. Dak Prescott. So now what the Dallas Cowboys have done is they've backed themselves into an unwinnable corner. Because now you have to pay Dak Prescott close to $275 million. Because Dak Prescott's numbers are comparable and in some cases better than Trevor Lawrence's numbers. But you wouldn't have had to worry about this if you didn't let him get to the end of his contract, which everyone was telling Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys organization not to do. Do not let Dak Prescott get to the end of his contract. So now this completely is going to dictate and alter the Dallas Cowboys moves, because if I'm Dak Prescott, and I deem him to be a very smart individual, if I'm Dak Prescott, there's no way in heaven or hell you think that I'm getting anything close to, or you think I'm getting anything under what Trevor Lawrence has done, because what Trevor Lawrence's importance to the Jaguars is the same type of importance that Dak Prescott is to the Cowboys, but Dak Prescott's is way more important, especially when we talk about value to team. The fear that people have, right, especially in negotiation, is watching somebody else get. That's why people were so upset with the Cleveland Browns, because a lot of people thought that the Deshaun Watson deal was going to set the market, because Deshaun Watson, it wasn't because of just the money. It was the fact that there's quarterbacks that can compare their accolades to Deshaun Watson, and that's also what kind of hurt Lamar Jackson. Well, Trevor Lawrence is the same way, especially when we talk about Dak Prescott. Now, I'll say this. I didn't think it was the case now, but the Dallas Cowboys are in a position where they could now lose CeeDee Lamb and Michael Parsons. I would be shocked if they both stay, because now I'll say this. They are in desperate waters, and there's a good chance that they lose 2 out of their 3 big players: Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Parsons. The issue is, while maybe the easiest person to replace is CeeDee Lamb, the easiest person to lose is Dak Prescott. Because if you go to the negotiation table and saying, hey, we'll pay you anything, we're going to pay you something significantly less than Trevor Lawrence, I'm almost sure there's teams lining up that would pay. Even though people want to talk about Dak Prescott's playoffs, Cool. There are still teams that would line up to give Dak Prescott what just Trevor Lawrence just got. Poverty franchises, man. I'm not gonna call them a poverty franchise because they constantly win 10 wins a season, but smart franchises do not let situations back them up into a corner like the Dallas Cowboys are in right now. And this continues to happen under Jerry Jones's watch. So we'll see. We'll see. Shouts out to Trevor Lawrence for getting his 5-year extension. It's definitely deserved. And now it's very interesting to see what players like Dak Prescott, what players like Tua Tagovailoa, what players like Jordan Love, what they're going to get. Because all those players you can say are closer to Trevor Lawrence than wide receivers that are looking for a payday are to Justin Jefferson. And now that you see that Trevor Lawrence, who is one of the top tier players in that class, in that market, got $275 million. Now we're gonna see. Don't get me. Tua is incredibly important to the Dolphins. The Jordan Love is incredibly important to Green Bay, and Dak Prescott is uberly important to the Dallas Cowboys. So we will see, but it will be interesting. So yeah, let's move forward and. Now we get to the unpopular topic of the day, and I want to do something fun. I want to do something a little interesting. I wanted to bring a Twitter and X conversation to the podcast. And I wanted to, with this being the end of the NBA season, obviously we still have the WNBA, we still have baseball. Hockey is probably about to end as I'm recording this. The game is tonight. Right now, Florida's up 3-1. We'll talk about it if and when the series is over. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring a Twitter conversation over to the podcast. The question was, now this is not a sports topic. So, yeah. The unpopular topic of the day, the question is, if you could only listen to 10 albums for the rest of my life, what would they be? That's a good question. That's a good question. Now I have to. This was a tough question because they didn't ask what my favorite albums are, because my favorite albums are not. Most of my favorite albums are in this top 10, but not all of them, because if that's the case, I would put in a bunch of J. Cole, I put in a bunch of Kendrick, I put in a bunch of Drake, and then call it a day. But I wouldn't, if I had to listen to 10 albums for the rest of my life, I would not get a broad experience. I would not get a musical experience that I would hope for, because I'm only stuck listening to 3 or 4 people. I just, which makes this question much harder for me, because I actually was like, all right, let me think about this, Now, yes, there are some Kendricks in there. There are some Drakes, but I had 10 albums that sounded different, but I wouldn't feel like I'm missing out musically if I didn't listen to if I had these, you know what I'm saying? Let me first start with a couple honorable mentions. I don't have any J. Cole. Now, people understand, and people that know me know that J. Cole is one of, if not my favorite rapper. J. Cole deserves, 2014 Forest Hill Drive, the off season I love. Might Delete Later I love. For Your Eyes Only. And if we're talking about mixtapes, which is another thing, I didn't add mixtapes in here, because if that's the case, then obviously Friday Night Lights would be in here, But J. Cole is not in here. I just felt there were 10 albums that I could not leave off and have a magical musical experience for the rest of my life. And as much as it pains me, because people know that J. Cole is one of my favorite rappers, he's not on this list. Chris Brown's not on this list. Now, again, another person, I love listening to Chris Brown's music. He's not on this list. And I did think would have been a little bit of a cheat code if I added his last few albums. Like if I added Breezy, if I added Heartbreak on a Full Moon, Indigo, 1111, because those are like long projects. Like I think Heartbreak on a Full Moon, the deluxe, that joint's like 2 hours long. So obviously I could cheat with that, but I just didn't want to. And again, Chris Brown is one of my favorite artists at this point. One of the best artists to ever come out, especially with what he's able to do, but he's just not on my list. I don't want to, and there's a bunch of, there's a bunch of albums that could have been on my list, like Cleo Soul could have been on this list. West Side Boogie could have been on this list. Big Crit, shouts out to, I definitely grew up. He's not on the list. Kid Cudi is down this list. Definitely grew up listening to Kid Cudi. But, these are the 10 albums that if I had to listen to just 10 for the rest of my life, these 10 albums, I feel like I would be musically complete. And this is no particular order, but I'll give you my 10. One of them is arguably my favorite album of all time. Now, people that know me know that I am a huge musically Kanye fan. What Kanye does outside of musically, I can't rock with. I don't know this man like that. I don't agree with some of his takes. A lot of his takes I don't agree with. But musically, he is one of the greatest artists we've ever seen, in my opinion. And one of my favorite albums of all time, if not my favorite album of all time, is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasies. I think that is Kanye's greatest album. I will say that that's one of the greatest albums ever. And I feel like there's so many great singular stories that are in this album that obviously draw to a bigger one. I feel like, again, that's one of my favorite albums of all time. And it would behoove me not to put it on this list. So one of the albums is good. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasies. Another one, had to get Kendrick in there. Now, a lot of people, Kendrick is starting to build a body of work that is very hard to go against, and it's very hard not to say, hey, this is his best album, that's his best album. I don't know. My favorite Kendrick, now Kendrick has not dropped a bad piece of work in my opinion, but my favorite Kendrick album is Good Kid, Mad City. I feel like if you want a good representation of, obviously I don't live in Compton, I'm not from Compton, but if you want a complete body of work that tells a beautiful story, Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar is incredible. And I had to put it on my list. Also remember that this is my list. I'm not saying that these have to be on your list. I'm not saying that my list is perfect and your list isn't. What I'm saying is if I had to listen to 10 albums for the rest of my life, these are the albums that I would listen to. Let's get back to the regular series program. Illmatic has to be on there. If you want, I just feel like, obviously rap is my favorite genre of music, hip hop and rap, and I don't think that we would be here if it wasn't for obviously some significant albums. One of those albums being the Illmatic. So I have Illmatic on my list. I have Views. I know a lot of people are gonna disagree. Now, if we're talking about mixtapes, I think that If You're Reading This Is Too Late is Drake's best body of work. But if we're just talking about things that are classified as albums, I will go down to saying that Views is Drake's best album. I know people are gonna say, Take Care. People are gonna say Nothing Was the Same, and that's cool. My favorite Drake album is Views, and I will go down in saying that forever. From Western Road Flows to Hotline Bling, there's a lot of great music on Views, and that's my favorite Drake album. So I have Views. Michael Jackson had to be on this list, and I put Thriller. I grew up. I was never going as far. I'm not gonna go as far as say that I had like the glove or whatever, but I used to be a Michael Jackson stan, bro. And don't get me wrong, Michael Jackson is still Michael Jackson. He's probably the greatest artist ever to walk the face of the earth. Think about it. Bad. Do you understand? Almost every Michael Jackson album, almost every, is just banger after banger after banger. It's crazy. And Thriller probably has the most. So Michael Jackson, I have Thriller album. Now, also side note, Travis Scott's not in this, and people know how much I like Travis Scott. Neither is Jay-Z. I'm just not. Jay-Z. I love Jay-Z. He's a great rapper. Obviously, probably arguably the GOAT, but nah. Let's get back. I have the Carter 2. Man, I don't think people, especially in my high school days, I don't think people understand the connection that I have with Carter 2 and how the Carter 2 almost shaped what I was doing in middle school / high school. I don't remember exactly when, but the Carter 2 to me is Lil Wayne's best album, not best project, best album. And I understand that if we're talking about hits, Carter 3 probably has more hits, but the Carter 2, whether we talk about Hustler Music, whether we talk about whether we talk about Mo Money, Carter 2 is it. So I have the Carter 2. If I'm not mistaken, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's my last rap album. Okay. There's two artists that I just have an affinity for. One of which I grew up listening to. The other one, she's just incredible. That is Jasmine Sullivan and Anthony Hamilton. My mom, I grew up listening to Anthony Hamilton, and I just love Jasmine Sullivan and her voice and how she's able to sing, and I think she's one of the greatest singers of all time. With that being said, I have two albums. I have Justin. Oh no, why do I keep saying Justin? I have a Jasmine Sullivan and an Anthony Hamilton album. For Anthony Hamilton, I have Soulfire. Anthony Hamilton has probably the most soulful voice you will ever hear. And he's one of the best artists ever he's one of the best singers ever as far as I'm concerned. Anthony Hamilton is an incredible singer, and Soulfire is probably my favorite Anthony Hamilton album. Ball and Chain is probably one of my favorite songs. Daydreaming is probably my favorite song. I would have to think about it, but Daydreaming is on Soulfire, so Soulfire had to be on this list. And for Jasmine Sullivan, Hotels and Motels. I probably have no business loving this album nor loving this song as much as I do, but BPW is probably my favorite Jasmine Sullivan song. Yeah. Hotels, she did her thing on Hotels and Motels, and it's one of my favorite albums ever. Now, all of these aren't my favorite albums, but that's one of my favorite of all time. So Hotels and Motels, definitely. Then I had to put in two classics. In the last two, I have Rapture by Anita Baker. She be wilding nowadays, but growing up, my mom introduced me to Anita Baker very young, and I've been going crazy for Anita Baker ever since. I was actually heartbroken I couldn't go to her concert. That's how much I listen to Anita Baker. She's incredible. She's definitely on my list. And the last one is Confessions by Usher. I think Confessions is arguably one of the greatest R&B albums of all time. And I had to put on the list. So my complete list is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasies, Good Kid, Mad City, Illmatic, Thriller, Views, Hotels, Motels, Soulfire, Carter 2, Rapture, and Confessions. Now, again, these aren't my favorite albums. These are the albums that I would listen to for the rest of my life and not feel stagnant, not feel like, dog, I don't feel like listening to this no more. Those are the 10 albums. So let me know you guys. I would love to know. And there you have it. I was going to talk about Klay Thompson unfollowing the Warriors, but I don't care. It's just a negotiation tactic. And that's a tactic that we use in 2024. If he stays with Golden State, if he leaves, we'll see. But yeah, I was going to talk about it. I'm not trying to do that. But there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Popular Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening. If you want a Popular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link's in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate everyone that listens. I appreciate everyone that follows. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. If you get this far in the episode and you're not subscribed, I don't know what to tell you, bro. But I appreciate you guys. I apologize I didn't record on Saturday. I had a bunch of technical issues. The whole power went out, actually, in my house while I was recording, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this again. So I apologize, but I'm back again. I appreciate all you guys, and subscribe to the YouTube. Also, I understand there's people that only watch me on YouTube. I understand there's only people that listen to me on the DSPs, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Pandora, wherever you get your DSPs. I should be there. Follow or subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Again, no supporter is bigger than the other, so I appreciate you all. If you are listening on DSPs, please listen or please follow. It means a lot. Also, follow the socials. Follow Instagram, follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily, whether those reels, whether those are chats. If you want to connect with me, if you want to debate with me, just keep it respectful. And I don't mind going back and forth. It just means that not only do you are seeing my stuff and pay attention to what I'm doing, but you're passionate in what you like, and I appreciate that. So please, follow the socials, follow Instagram, follow TikTok. It definitely means a lot. And until next time, much love.